Hi everyone, my name is Kate Peterson and I'm the Undergraduate Services Librarian at the University of Minnesota Libraries. With this video, what I want to do is just give you a hint or a taste or something very small of some ways that you want to maybe begin to think about the incoming class of first year students and their experiences with the libraries, with information literacy, with research, with academic research, and with writing papers. So that as you're thinking about your course, you can think about ways that you want to frame all of the various activities that you're doing and your assignments and so forth. So I'm going to share my screen, and I have just a very brief PowerPoint because I couldn't really think of a better way to do that. So let me do this. So there's a picture, and the picture behind me is Walter Library, which is still closed at this moment in time. But definitely some things to keep in mind about students is that what they think about the word library means many, many different things to many, many different students. So often a first year mindset is influenced by, first of all, a decline in school librarians and in libraries. We estimate at this point that 25, 30, 40% of high schools no longer certainly don't have school librarians, and some don't even have libraries. Some students have never used a public library, or even they could come from a country as well where libraries are very different than they are here. So those are some things to keep in mind. Many students are unfamiliar with using library websites to find sources as well. So even in high school, if they maybe had written a paper, done some research, they might have used a public library website. They might have used tools that we're very familiar with, like Google and Wikipedia, but they may or may not have used kind of a library website the way we're pretty used to doing research. Students are definitely new to academic research and the idea of what scholarly journals are and have they been created and things like that. And then at the bottom here, you can see I just have this Wikipedia plus Google plus copy plus paste plus EasyBib can be kind of a formula that some students are sort of bringing to the table as they're coming here to the university. So a couple of things that I want you to keep in mind is that you are an expert. I don't know if you feel like an expert, but in terms of doing research, finding sources that are interesting, finding relevant sources, evaluating sources, being critical about the information you're reading, you are absolutely an expert, and you have over the years that you have been a student and an instructor have gained many, many, many of those skills, and many students do not yet have those skills. It's still very much in process. Often students don't really have a mental model of how information really gets created and how a story that they read about a current event might be different from the day it happened versus 2 weeks from that day versus an article in a magazine or a newspaper on a news website versus on government information versus maybe eventually in a journal article. And like the distinctions and the differences and how the information even came to be created or who created it, whether it was a journalist or somebody that was actually there more like a primary source, or whether it was an academic or a scholar or a researcher, a lot of that nuance is really lost on students because they don't have that good mental model yet of how that information actually gets created, and then how you kind of put it into a hierarchy, if a hierarchy is useful based on how you're going to be using that information. Students also don't have a mental model of how academic publishing and libraries work. And keep in mind, this could be their first paper. So they don't have necessarily a good sense of how either magazines or journals or even newspapers get kind of created in terms of there's an issue and then there's a volume and there are articles and then you search a database and all of those different things. Many students today, I'm finding, because they've really accessed all of that stuff virtually almost only online, that an article that they see in, that's a magazine article looks the same as a journal article, looks the same as another article. There aren't a lot of visual clues that can help students to differentiate those things I was talking about in terms of who wrote the information, how it might be useful to them, how they might want to use it. Now, of course, everything that I've just mentioned, there's a broad spectrum of students that we know. Some students have done many research papers and could have been in a very different place. So I'm just making some broad generalizations to keep in mind as you're thinking about your course and your assignments and things like that. So what I recommend is try it. Try to think like a brand new first year student. So go to the library website, lib.umn.edu, pick a topic that you don't know anything about, and I just ask you to sit for 15 minutes, 10 minutes, and try to find a couple of sources. Where would you go on our pretty big library website? Which tool did you use? What terms did you use? How did you try to find those tools? Then how did you try to make sense of the sources? I found that that can just be a really great way to kind of recenter ourselves and like, wow, this is confusing. And we keep trying to make improvements to the library website. And sometimes they work well and sometimes they don't. So that's what I recommend, just trying it, because then that can give you a really great way to talk and think with your students, because they're, especially in this class, if they're new first year students, it's going to be probably their first time using the library website. All right, real quickly, I just want to mention a couple of services for your first year students. So you, of course, and your students, real quick, of course, have access to millions of sources, journals, magazines, newspapers, online books, all available from lib.umn.edu, all available online. One problem that we've realized is that students have heard that the libraries are closed. So then they just think of the library as a physical place. So then they haven't been using the library necessarily as much. And I'm not sure what fall is going to look like yet, but keep that in mind, that telling them, again, use the library, but say use lib.umn.edu or use the website. And that's really what you're talking about. I think it's going to help make sure that they know that everybody's kind of on the same page with the sources we want them to try to use and explore. Our peer research consultant programs, we call them, is the program we call it, and they are peer library research tutors. So they're students that we train through very extensively, and they can help students to get started with finding research, exploring topic ideas, coming up with good keywords, finding those actual sources, whether it's magazines or scholarly journal articles or different things like that. They can help a little bit with citing, or some of the tools that we have available that can help with citing, and just overall can just really like help students kind of get forward, especially if a student is stuck or if this is their first research paper. The peer research consultants can be a really great place to refer your students to. In spring, like many other areas on campus, we were traditionally face-to-face and we pivoted to online. We're still not entirely sure what online is going to, or what fall is going to look like, but we will definitely be having online appointments, and it's a 30-minute appointment that students can schedule. We have a whole different range of times, so it's pretty easy for students to be able to get in and meet with those students when they're told and when it's suggested to them. Of course, another great service we have is Chat with the Librarian 24/7. Again, been around for a long time and it still works really well. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, students can get online and chat with the librarian. Highly recommend that service. That can be a great thing to just build a really short little assignment around. You could ask students to chat with a librarian and then give them like a week or a pretty big chunk of time, and they could try it at any time during the day. They could ask about keywords for their topic, or maybe a couple of databases that might be helpful, and just kind of get them using the service. And then you could just ask them to reflect on how the service went. How did it go? How did it feel? Could you imagine this being useful, and some things like that. We, of course, can also get things that we don't own through our interlibrary loan service. That's definitely a service that most students are unfamiliar with, but it's just useful to know. Again, the way I frame that might be to say to students, never pay for articles. The library should always be able to get them for you, and you just fill out a request form online. All right, good. So there's going to be another video somewhere in this training that's going to talk more about some of the different assignments and the stuff that's been built into the curriculum. So this is just meant to give you kind of a quick highlight. So to recap, we wanted you to be sure that you know about kind of the mindset that some students are going to be coming in as first year writing. We wanted you to think about how you are an expert and how much you actually have a mental model for how libraries and publishing work, and you have a mental model for how information gets created and produced, and your students might still be developing those models themselves. And lastly, just so that you're aware of the various services that are available to students, the majority of them, all of them listed here, in fact, are available online. So please don't hesitate to ask us any questions, and we look forward to working with you and supporting the students in this course. Thank you.